Brody, so great to have you back. So what's it been like with Brian Kelly in charge?
It's been different in some ways, absolutely. In terms of how the program's being run and whatnot, I do think it's it's been a change in terms of maybe a little more accountability, a little more regimented, things like that. In terms of covering him, every week people are making a different joke about his dancing or how he talks, so that's been fun for me.
Let's talk about the personality stuff first, because he's come under, a moderate degree of criticism for some of the things that he's done, which to many are engaging. It's Brian Kelly not being the staid voice of Notre Dame that we've been so accustomed to seeing. How do you think that is playing among LSU people?
Yeah, I tend to, from the sense I've gotten, lean toward, the way you put it. I think he's being engaging. I think the best way to put it is he's leaning into it in a way that I think a lot of people at Notre Dame would tell you he didn't at all times, whether it be with recruiting or whether it be with just, being involved all the time and things like that. So I think he's doing some things that are rubbing some people the wrong way because, like I said, he is holding some people accountable. Things are a little more regimented, things like that. Some players have left the program somewhat related to that already. But, I think in general, and I think there's some tension at times. At the same time, I think there are a lot of people who actually are viewing it as a bit of a breath of fresh air. I think he, recruiting-wise, we've talked to many recruits who are like, wow, he's much more personable than we were led to believe. I think that's a good example. And talking to staffers and whatnot the last few weeks, the theme has kind of been that he is I think that you just know what you're getting, I think is the best way to put it. He is direct. Yeah, he might be hard on people, but he is direct. He says, this is what I'm asking for, and he stays consistent with it is a very big theme I've gotten. It's, hey, this is what I'm communicating, and this is what I want. While I think, a lot of times in college football, people are kind of figuring out as they go, and that might change day to day. And I think that's something you saw in the last two LSU head coaches. And as you know, a lot of the staff members have been there through all of that. So I think a lot of people are kind of like, oh, he might be tough, but it's like, this is how it can be. So I think there's been pros and cons to it for sure.
Brody, I keep hearing commentators mention, weird fit, and I realize you haven't been around as long as some of us, but you go back 20 years, how is Nick Saban and Les Miles a better fit or different fit than this guy? The only guy who's ever really fit is the obvious, Ed Ogeron.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. Like, sure, is he a complete personality fit? No, but to your exact point, I don't think that matters. I think the question worth asking these first few months or first year is not even about personality fit. It's just, hey, is he down to be an SEC recruiter? Go up against the Kirby Smarts every week. Does he have the connections to recruit down south? All those things. Those are real questions about the fit that I think are valid, and I think he's off to a solid start there. But in terms of fitting in with Louisiana, I'm with you. I think it's a little overblown. Nick Saban, nothing about him is inherently Louisiana. And I think Brian Kelly's actually, again, to our theme earlier, there's a lot of political background in his life, right? I think he's pretty personable when he needs to be, and I think he's done that pretty well so far in Baton Rouge. So I do tend to think it's a little, overblown. If he wins, they'll be happy.
Yeah, and winning now takes great recruiting, and great recruiting takes money, and however that money flows into the system, NIL-wise or elsewhere. How is LSU dealing with all that?
And I have a story coming out at some point, in the next few weeks or month that kind of gets into, I think LSU, if you talk to certain people around the business world in Baton Rouge would tell you in the recruiting world, they were kind of behind for a little bit. I think going into December and January, a lot of schools had better, systems, for lack of a better word, and NIL collectives and all these things that have been reported on so well that were a little more structured. And I think LSU kind of was, some of the business owners and whatnot of the world hadn't quite stepped up, and there hadn't been those people really taking charge. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but I think that's led to some players, the missing out on some players leaving. And I know one player we're going to discuss today is Kayshon Boutte, and there were strong rumors of him leaving, for a potentially rival Alabama in December and going into January. That was a thing, and I think it would be naive to think NIL was not a part of that. And then some local business owners did get very heavily involved in the last 3 months, local attorneys, things like that. And Boutte did get a big deal, and several players, a lot of these transfers for sure, have gotten some of those NIL deals. So I do think LSU is playing catch up for sure in that department, but I do think they're at least on the right track.
Well, let's finish the conversation with Boutte, because we heard what you already heard yesterday or whenever it was with Brian Kelly talking about the kabuki dance with Boutte. Where is that right now?
Yes, that was. I think it caught us all a little off guard how blunt he was, and just basically said things are tense. And yeah, I think there's the context, right? There's the context of the Alabama flirtation. Shoot, Boutte even said on a local podcast yesterday morning, just openly said, yeah, I was kind of thinking about if I wanted to be here with the new staff and all that back in December and January. So I think that's kind of out in the open. Then you add in his surgery, then now needing a second surgery, and how that goes, where sometimes you're kind of away from things, and that leads to attention. Then he has been, he's admitted this, he's been very involved with NIL the last 2-3 months, and he even talked on that same podcast about how he's realizing business is kind of full time, and that leads me to Kelly's comments, which were pretty openly saying, hey, he's learning you need to be involved, and just because you're injured doesn't mean you can't be involved in everything. And again, the first things we were talking about, Kelly is running things a little more like a tight ship. He is, having things more regimented, and that is rubbing some people the wrong way. And that's my long way of saying I think those comments were quite talking about a mixture of, yeah, I think Kelly wants him being involved in some things, and maybe he's not stepping up and being involved in everything. And I think that's something Kelly's trying to improve, so far in his first year on the job, mixed with, Boutte dealing with all these other things and having a tough time with his second surgery and, being, I think Kelly might have used the word distracted in there. And I think that's a fair thing there. So I don't think it's, DEFCON 1 panic mode, like there's major issues, but it's something to watch and something very odd for, as a coach to just volunteer that tension.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.